Hi there everybody and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking about making payments on our purchase ledger. So one of the ways that I can make a payment on my purchase ledger is using the payment journal. So I'm just going to talk through how I would process a payment using that functionality. So I'm going to come into cash management on my home screen here and I'm going to go into payment journals. So I'm presented here with a number of different payment journal batches. So I'm on the payment journal screen here, but I have a number of different batches within the payment journal. So what is a batch within Business Central? Well, a batch is basically the payment journal, but it's a different version of it. So I've got the cash batch, the general batch, and the payment registration batch there. And all these different batches are different versions of the payment journal screen itself. So I can come into here in the cash batch and I can enter my lines, I can modify my lines, I can delete them, I can post them as I see fit. But equally, whilst I'm working in the cash batch, another user could be working in the general batch. The idea being that whilst the other user is working in the general batch, they will not see or be affected by any of the lines that I am working on within the cash batch. Now, how we set up our batches doesn't really have to be driven by user, it can be driven by process. I guess it just depends on what works for us as a business. So just to continue with the demonstration, within the payment journals here, I'm going to go into the cash batch. So the first way that I can process a payment on the payment journal is that I can manually input a line. So if I just very quickly input a line here, I'm going to select a vendor. So I'm going to go with vendor 10,000 and I'm going to input an amount here. And I'm going to select my Lloyd's current account as the bank account. So very simply here, I have input a payment for vendor 10,000 on the 10th of April 2023 and it's for 100 GBP. And if I want to, I can go to apply entries. Bear in mind, I'm highlighting this line at this point in time because I can have multiple lines on my payment journal. So I can fill in another line here for vendor 20,000 if I wanted to, but I'm going to stick on the first line here. I'm going to highlight that line and I can go to apply entries here. And this brings up a new screen here called apply vendor entries for vendor 10,000, that is Fabricam Incorporated. And here I can select to apply the payment to one of the invoices that I have on the system. So any outstanding invoices that we have against that particular vendor will be shown on the apply vendor entries screen. So I can see here that we have one invoice, so it's document number 108201, and it has a remaining amount of £1,267.50. I know it's in pounds because the currency code here is blank, and a blank currency code in BC always means we're working in the local currency, which in this particular company is GBP. So what can I do to apply my £100 payment to this invoice? Well, whilst highlighting this line, I can say set applies to ID. So what you can see here, guys, is it's automatically put in the full amount of my invoice, which is a problem because we only have 100 GBP available, whereas the invoice is 1,267.5. So what I need to do is change the amount to apply here. So you can see it's defaulted in the full amount of my invoice, but I'm going to change that to 100. And you can see the fields along the bottom here look a little bit better now. The balance is 0. We have 100 available and we've applied 100. Just bear in mind, in this example we just have a single invoice here, but if we wanted to, we can select multiple records here by saying select more, and we can select more than one invoice to pay at one point in time and say set applies to ID and walk through the exact same steps that I've just done. So I'm going to press OK now, and what we can see is if I scroll to the right hand side here, we've got the applied checkbox is now marked as yes. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and post this journal line, and let's say yes. Let me say OK, and if I just step back to my vendors, and if I go into Fabricam, and if I go to their ledger entries, I can see here the last entry that was made is for our payment of 100 GBP. And if I want to check the invoice that that's applied to, I can click the three dots or the assist edit here, and I can go applied entries, and I can see that it's applied to document number invoice 108201. And I can go about unapplying and stuff as well, but that'll be one that we cover in another video. Obviously there are other implications of paying this invoice, so if I go to my cash management and bank accounts, we can also see within my Lloyds current account the balance has been affected by that particular payment of minus 100. So the general ledger entries here, we've got the amount is coming out from GL account 40101, and the other side of that transaction has gone to our accounts payable, our creditor control account 50100. So that's the first way that you can run a payment on your system. So I'm just going to go back into my payment journal, and we're going to use one of the functions that comes out of the box in Business Central to pull in some payments for our vendors. So I'm back on the payment journal screen, and I'm in my cash batch. So now I'm going to click prepare, and I'm going to say suggest vendor payments. So what is this report? Well, it's basically a report which will go away and find all of the outstanding invoices on the vendor ledger, and it will bring them back to our payment journal ready for us to pay them. So if I say suggest vendor payments, I'm presented with a report request page, and I can fill in some of the options here. So I have my last payment date, which is basically the date up until which I would like to pay outstanding invoices on my purchase ledger. So we can use the find payment discounts checkbox to find payment discounts when we're searching for invoices. We can use the vendor priority to make sure that BC prioritizes the payments that are being made to our vendors. So if we want to use this, I flag use vendor priority, and I put in an available amount, for example 100,000, and what BC will do is it will search for outstanding invoices using vendor priority. So just to very quickly move off this screen, if I go to my vendors, on the payments tab here, we have a priority field here, and basically we would need to input a priority against all of our vendors. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And we can tag our vendors appropriately, and we can suggest vendor payments by priority. So I think it's those vendors that have priority number 1, or the lowest number, would be the highest priority, then number 2, then number 3, etc. And obviously when we use this functionality, we have an available amount. So we're saying we've got £100,000 to do our payment run, and we want to use vendor priority to suggest all of the payments that should be made to our vendors. So I'm just going to unflag that for now and remove the 100,000. So we can skip exported payments. This is quite important because if you export a payment file which you upload to your banking software, you probably don't want to export the same payment twice, so we normally leave this checked. Another important one here is check other journal batches. So as I mentioned at the top of the video, you do have multiple batches that you can work off the payment journal from. And if there's another user also running suggest vendor payments in another journal batch, we use this checkbox here to check other journal batches to make sure that we're not trying to pay the same vendor twice. I mean, it's a good check to have. So we then have the summarize results section here where we can summarize per vendor and by dimension. So basically what this does is it changes the lines that are generated from our suggest vendor payments run. So if we have summarize per vendor selected, where a vendor has 10 invoices outstanding on their account, BC will say it will generate just one line for that vendor where summarize per vendor is marked as yes. If summarize per vendor is marked as no, it will generate 10 separate lines. And the same works by dimension. So I can drill in to dimension and I can select a dimension to summarize my results by if I want to. So we'll run through that in a second. But for now, I'm going to leave those both blank. And then we have some fields to fill in the journal lines that are generated. So we can say the posting date of my lines is going to be this date, the date of our payment run. But we do have the calculate posting date from applies to document due date if we want to use that. So I can set this as yes, and then I can set an offset here if I want to. And what this does is it basically picks the invoice due date for the invoice to which we are applying the payment, and it sets the posting date accordingly. You can have an offset in here, so you can set -2 days, +2 days as a field, a formula field in here if you want to. But for now, we're going to leave that blank and we're just going to go with the posting date. So we have the starting document number, which is automated in because I'm using a number series with this payment journal batch. We can have a new document number per line. And what's really important here is the balancing account type, which I'm going to set as bank account. And I'm going to use my Lloyds bank account here as the balancing account number. So we can also set the bank payment type as electronic payment if we're exporting a BACS file using data exchange definitions, but I'm going to leave that as blank and we'll cover that functionality in another video. So I do have a look up here to the vendor table. If I want to, I can filter by any field that we have available to us on the vendor table. So here is vendor number, but you can equally select other fields such as payment method code, currency code, anything else that you might want to filter or split up your vendors by when you're doing a payment run. For now, I'm going to leave those blank and I'm just going to hit OK. And what BC does is it scans all of our vendor ledger for open invoices, and it tells us you have created suggested vendor payment lines for all currencies. So let's go OK, and we now have some lines created on our payment journal. So you can see here I've got document number G04003 for vendor account 10,000. It's for an amount of 1,167.50, which is the remaining amount from that invoice that we just posted a manual payment for. And you can see the bank account is set as Lloyds on all of my lines. So it's basically done what we did in the first step, but it's done that automatically for us. And if I go to my apply entry screen, highlighting this first line here, you can see that it's done the application for us as well here. So it's got the amount to apply set as 1,167.50. And it's basically done that for all of the lines that we have here. So you can see we've got one line for vendor 10,000. We've got a few lines here for vendor 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 and 50,000. Now it's important to mention here at this point, these payments are not posted to the system. So they're effectively in a draft state. So they've not been committed to my Business Central environment until I go in and say post. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and delete these lines, which is totally fine at this point. We've not committed anything to our ledgers. And I'm just going to say prepare and suggest vendor payments again. So we're going to leave everything the same here, but the only thing that we're going to do this time is we're going to say summarize per vendor. And bear in mind you can summarize by dimension here, as I mentioned earlier. But I'm just going to change this back to bank account and Lloyd's. And let's say OK. And this time what you can see is we only have one line per vendor created on my payment journal. And the reason for that is because we only have the one line because we've got summarize per vendor selected on our suggest vendor payments run. And the amounts are all summarized in the amount column. So you can see we've got all of the amounts as appropriate here. And what we can then go ahead and do is just say post, and that will post these payments and it will hit the vendor ledger in exactly the same way as we saw in the first step. It will also hit the bank ledger because we're posting payments, remember, to our Lloyd's bank account. So that's the second way that we can generate payments from the payment journal. I'm just going to delete these lines because we don't need them. And the final way that we can generate a payment in Business Central from the vendor ledger is if I come into the vendor card, I can go into vendor ledger entries and I can put some filters on here to find my invoices that are outstanding. So if I just filter to where the document type is invoice, I can filter to where open is set to yes, and it shows me the only outstanding invoice for this vendor. And I can save this as a view as well, but we'll run through that in a bit more detail on another video. But just to run through the vendor ledger entries here, we've got our document type of invoice, document number is 108201, and we have a remaining amount here of 1,167.5. And what I can do here at the top in the actions bar is just hit create payment. And what this will do is it will present me with a page on which I can add some filters. So it's telling me the template name is payment, the batch name is cash. I have a posting date, a starting document number, and I'm going to select my bank account as Lloyd's. And like I could on the suggest vendor payments, I could say this is an electronic, computer check, manual check payment if I want to, but I'm just going to leave that as blank for now. So if I say OK on this, what it will do is it will send a line to my payment journal with the amount of 1,167.5. And it's got my Lloyd's bank account on there as well. So it's basically generated a line in the same way that we did in the suggest vendor payment step, but it's basically got a single line here because we came from vendor 10,000. And bear in mind, we did this for a single invoice for a single vendor, but you can run the create payments functionality for multiple vendors at the same time from the vendor ledger entry screen if you wanted to. So guys, those are some of the ways that we can generate payments from our vendor ledger in Business Central. There are a few other ways that you can do this, but we'll cover those in another video. So there's areas such as the payment reconciliation journal, which I'd like to cover as well. But as mentioned, we'll cover those in another video. So I hope you guys found this useful. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.